Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
I am thrilled to welcome Cheryl Texeira, certified profit acceleration business coach and founder of Ghost Light Business Coaching and Consulting. With a background in government systems design, Cheryl now engineers rapid revenue breakthroughs for service-based entrepreneurs. She's helping clients unlock hidden profit, build a market-dominating position, and scale sustainably, often adding between $10,000 and $50,000 in a monthly profit in just weeks, without increasing ad spend, or working more hours. Get ready to discover how to find $100,000 hiding in your business and build a category of one position that ends price shopping. Cheryl, welcome to the conversation.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation because it is different than many that we have on this show. So explain for us what you're doing and why it's so important right now.
Yeah, so as a profit acceleration business coach, we are solely focused on making more profit. And there's many ways to do that. And so one of the reasons why what I'm doing is so important is because I simplify things by giving my clients a system. And it starts with a CEO dashboard with 4 profit levers: more leads, more conversions, more transactions, and more profit. Ends up being more lifetime value of a client, bigger spend from each client. And so I give them that dashboard, which simplifies everything so that they're not worried about little micro data, micro KPIs like likes and vanity metrics, things like that. They're focused at the CEO level. What is really happening in their business? And I also help them focus in on their profit and loss statement. So not only do they get their books in order, then they have a reason to keep their books current so that they can really watch their profit and loss statement. I have them checking their profit and loss statement weekly because our system is not just a tactic or a strategy. It is a true system. And we rely on that data from the profit and loss statement and that CEO dashboard to make sure that we're not only targeting the right places to help increase profit, but also that we're monitoring the progress so we can celebrate a 3% increase and then do another 3% increase, or maybe it'll be a 5% increase. But a lot of times what happens is business owners dismiss something as small as a 3% increase as a fluke or something that's not going to continue to happen. And so what I show them is a 3% increase is worth celebrating, and it can be built on the same way. If you add 10% to $100, it's $110. If you add 10% to $110, it's $121, and so on. That exponential growth is what we're after. So we literally can make a 3% increase in 3 different areas of a business and create a 46% increase in profit. So that is really the bottom line of what we do, and it's a whole system. So a client not only just gets something like a fly-by-night, like really quick, a 3-month program that's going to give you X amount of dollars. Instead, it's a long-term strategy and a long-term system for sustainable growth. And it's really creating a recession-proof, market fluctuation-proof, pandemic-proof type of business.
Those are all really big things. And I love in this, right? This is not a $97 program that you run for 2 weeks and nothing actually happens to your business in that window of time. You are building out an operating engine for profit management and growth strategy development, right? So with this, the differentiator is really teaching an emerging CEO how to run a business correctly. Right? We don't often talk enough about knowing our numbers, and yet it's one of those fundamental practices that every CEO should know. And looking at the P&L on a weekly basis, some weeks it might hurt a little bit, and it's a painful learning experience. But right, they're just numbers, and if we don't understand them, we will discount a 3% uplift. But when you take a 3% and a 3% and a 3%, you were talking about a potential 46% increase to the business overall. So these are significant impacts. Cheryl, talk to me a little bit about do you have a story from a client where this has, over the time that your tenure with them, changed the trajectory for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I was working with a social media expert. She was doing great, had a great business, everything's going great. She had a particular offer that was bringing in about $2,500 a week, and she wanted to increase that and get it kind of, going on its own so it would get its own energy, right? And so we worked on what we call the market dominating position, and we just really dive into that. A market dominating position is different from a regular positioning type of statement. It's really about the offer, who you serve, your innovation behind that offer, and then the bold promise of that offer, which is really based in the client results that they get. And so it allows them to step confidently into that promise. And when we did that and we did the digging, we found that the results that she was getting for her clients it was much higher than what she actually expected she was going to get from the clients. And so she was able to step into that and then add that into her sales page for this particular offer it had two choices. You could do a 3-month or you could do a 1 year. And the result of that was a pretty massive increase. She went from 2,500 a week to about 6,500 a week. And then her close rate went from, I think it was 20% up to about 54%. And her more people opted in. So her average sale went up about $158 per sale because more people opted into that higher level offer. So it really set the stage for knowing that that bold promise, when you can make that promise and put it out there with confidence, it helps people trust you. And when you're confident about it, that trust is going to go so far. And so more people are going to invest more deeply with you and stick with you longer.
And longer term, I think, is a key part of that. One of the things that you sprinkled in that story was learning about the actual value her customers were receiving. As business owners and people who own and operate, right, we deliver our services. We start to make assumptions over time about what we think the value is to our clients and to our customers. One of the things I will guarantee anybody who's listening, whatever we assume that we think that we know, we are 100% wrong if we aren't actually getting the data from the clients and from our customers. So going through that exercise and actually starting to understand what the true value was, what that impact is on fulfilling the promise, changed how she positioned her business so that she was now selling more of her higher ticket offering with greater success. That is a huge shift for an owner operator.
Absolutely.
Absolutely fantastic part of that story. With this, you're teaching skills that will stay. Obviously, your role is there with them for a duration of time, but these are fundamentals that will grow with them. Cheryl, what was the transition for you from being government to coming out into your entrepreneurial journey? What was that catalyst? What was that bold decision all about?
Yeah, so I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit. When I was in college, I had a tutoring business and kind of turned it into a real business, not just a fly by night, or not just a side hustle, I should say. Um, so I wanted to start something. I was getting closer to the end of my career. I was at my 3rd year at the time, and I wanted to just do something else. And so I started building websites on WordPress for my brother-in-law, and I started getting a few clients, and I started getting so overwhelmed by all of the work. And so I decided to start practicing what I had learned in my career in project management and the framework of Scrum, which is an agile project management framework. And that framework is kind of the foundation for all of the project management softwares that we use today: Monday, ClickUp, Trello, all of those, right? And so I started using that, and it was such a relief, and it was so fast that I thought, "Oh my gosh, I gotta teach this to every entrepreneur." So I opened a Facebook group, and I went into another group I was in and invited a bunch of people. I got about 60 people, and I started teaching right in the comments of my Facebook group. No video, maybe a graphic here and there, but I was just teaching Scrum. And I mean, it was amazing. Everybody was so excited about it. They loved it. And I ended up converting about 4 people into my next level program. I thought, okay, I've got something here. And so I hired a coach and I did my very first live launch on video inside my Facebook group the week that the whole entire nation closed down for the pandemic, March 16th of 2020. And so that was a little nerve-wracking, but boy, did it teach me a lot about resilience and also about the need for business coaching is still there, whether you have a pandemic or not. And so I did end up closing two clients during that time and then went on to serve another 20 clients that year. And so that was kind of how it got birthed. And then it evolved because I was really teaching them how to implement marketing and creating a lead magnet, creating funnels, doing a live event so that they could convert people. So I was getting more and more into that and I was training myself more and more, spent a lot of money training myself, worked with a lot of coaches. And then I stumbled across the Profit Acceleration System, which is the founder is Carl Bryan. He's a podcaster as well. You might find him out there. Great man and brilliant marketer. I loved the system that he created, the profit acceleration system. It was so in line with how I think in terms of operations and continuous improvement and a cyclical type of, program. And that's what profit acceleration is all about. That exponential growth is a cyclical type of environment where it's not just one and done. You're always going back, reviewing the numbers. You're always making improvements, little tweaks. I mean, it can be the littlest thing. When that story I told you about with my client, we changed like 3 lines on her sales page and it created that much of an impact. That's amazing, right? And so you don't just tear everything down and start over. You actually start working with what you have. And I see so often clients going from one thing to another. Like I actually had a client who she would spend months creating something amazing. She would create it. And then she'd send out one email, nobody would buy, and she'd say, well, nobody wants that. So I'm like, no, people want this. You just have to do a full marketing campaign. And so that's what I really teach my clients now is you got to give it due diligence. You have to have a full marketing campaign, measure those results, get that data, and then you can start, increasing. And you want to compare your data to industry averages, right? And so a lot of times people will discount like they got 2 sales. Well, if you had 100 people looking at your offer, 2 sales is good. That's industry average.
Painful though that might feel to us, right, as individuals, right, as we're looking at that, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever, and 2 out of 100 were interested. It is still the industry standard and the average, and that's okay. It just hurts a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. That's right. So that bold shift, actually, after 2 years of being in business, I retired from my full-time career 5 years early. And, um, and I actually had to buy myself out. So I had to invest a lot of money to get out so I could do this full time. I haven't looked back. I've just been growing and loving this. I love my work. I love a challenge. I love solving problems for my clients. And that's something that I brought with me from my days in IT is, I was happiest when we were going 90 miles an hour with our hair on fire. So, things like that, the system being down, stuff like that, none of that scares me because I've lived through that my whole career. Having to jump into something and do advanced things when you're a beginner is something I did my whole career. So it helps me demystify for my own clients and help them be more bold and fearless so they can take chances and just roll with the punches a little bit more. Stuff's going to happen. You got to roll with it and just know you're learning.
One of the things that's so much fun for me with my practice and coming from an environment and a mindset similar to yours, right? Background in project management, the PMP, the Lean Six Sigma Master Black Battle, all of these things that my clients today don't want to hear or care anything about. Those trials by fire that we went through in our more corporate type and professional careers, our first chapters, I guess maybe. that brings that resilience to uncertainty. It allows us to navigate and help them learn how to navigate we don't know what we don't know, and whatever happens, as long as we're making the best decisions in a moment, is all any of us can ask for in a business. We might find out next week we made a poor decision. Oops, we course correct and we move on, right? There is no perfect decision in any circumstance. There's always multiple perspectives that can play out from that point forward. So I love that you have that background and that ability to bring that sort of that calm that comes from having been 100 miles an hour, hair on fire, don't know what we don't know, but we're going and we're moving forward, right? In that agile mindset of we're making the best decision we can right now. In this part of your journey, right? Congratulations on retirement, creating the second chapter, and having so much fun doing it, because there's so much that we can bring from big environments down into entrepreneurs who are starting out and building new businesses. What are some of the roadblocks? Obviously, the pandemic was one of them, but for you, as you're growing and scaling your business, there's only so much you. So how do you continue? What's your growth strategy, and how do you build beyond just you?
Yeah. So one of the most important things to do is to be documenting what you do and creating policies, procedures, that kind of stuff. It's really important, especially when you start hiring, and you can get people up to speed faster if you create standard operating procedures. You can keep them compliant with your standard operating procedures with policy. And so that is one of the things that I help my clients do, because if they do end up making their business, a multi-million dollar business, which is absolutely possible, they want to sell that business, they need those policies and procedures in place in order to do that anyway. And it adds value. Every single policy and procedure that somebody creates is about worth $1,000 of value to their business, right? And some businesses have thousands of policies and procedures. So you can imagine how important that is. So the other thing is to just keep writing down all the things that you do. Of course, you want to look at what you're good at, what you are bad at, what you hate, what you love. And then the biggest thing is focusing on the right things, the right numbers. As the CEO of your business, you need to be focusing on those higher level numbers, not the micro. Leave that to your team. Stacy Tuschel, a business coach, she's notorious for saying your staff should be responsible for KPIs, and they should be making at least 2 times their salary just by their work. And so putting them responsible for a specific KPI, like social media engagement for your social media strategist, that's where those KPIs belong, not on your shoulders. And so making sure that you have the responsibilities in the right place is going to be huge. And that's why I help them not only create policy and procedures, but also roles and responsibilities and job descriptions. So at least they know what hat they're wearing while they're doing all the things. Because one of the things I noticed too is they make decisions from the wrong hat, wearing the wrong hat, right? They're struggling with something, say a tech problem or something, and then they end up scrolling Facebook and they buy something because they're trying to solve that problem. Well, they made that decision in haste and out of distress, and not from a CEO mindset. And so I really like to help them, really step into that CEO role. And then like what I was telling you about leads, conversions, transactions, and profit, that CEO dashboard is really their top level metrics. And then if those numbers aren't where they're supposed to be, they just need to dig in to those, because behind those 4 profit levers, we've got 50 strategies or more out there of how we can positively affect those 4 levers. And so instead of just diving down into the detail, let's start at the top, work our way down, because we see our business as a whole rather than just one little pain point. And you mentioned about about roadblocks and setbacks. And one of them for me has been boundaries on my time. I love to help people and I love challenges. And so, in my early days, I gave away a lot of my time, which is okay. It helps you build your business and stuff, but I did it to my own detriment. And, where I ended up in debt to keep somebody else from getting into debt. And I just, I learned now that I really have to have not only boundaries on my pricing, but boundaries on my time as well, because like I might put somebody in a lower level because they can't afford it, but then I end up giving them the higher level service anyway, because I want them to succeed so badly. And so that's been tough. I can't help everybody. And that's what I think, coaches, especially coaches, need to learn is you can't help everybody. If they can't, you can't sacrifice your own self to help others, because then you can't survive and you won't be there to help other people.
Absolutely true. Cheryl, if what the stories you've shared have piqued the interest or curiosity from members of the audience, how do they find out more about you or learn more about Profit Accelerator and the market dominating position?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. My handle is Cheryl Texeira, so you can find me there. I'm happy to feel free to message me there. Also, my website, I have a simulator app on there, so you can reach that at CherylT.com/simulator app. There's a dash in between simulator and app, but you can get that simulator and it has a little training video. You can put your own numbers in, and then you can see the little areas and you can start putting percentages in. And so I challenge you to put your numbers in, put in like 3% in just 3 areas, and you will see that it will yield a 46% increase. Put another 3% in another area, it's a 64% increase. And the thing is that the market dominating position has been known to increase revenue by 50 to 200%. And like I said, with my client's story, we increased it by nearly 200% later on. I mean, the first 7 weeks was up to 6,400 on average. And then after that, it just kept going up. By, by the time we stopped working together, she was making about 3K a month from that offer instead of around 10, 12K. So massive, massive changes just by creating that positioning that is just so uniquely you that you can't, it eliminates the competition, right? It eliminates it because nobody can compare to you. It's like apples to oranges.
Absolutely. Cheryl, thank you for a fantastic conversation. And the bottom line, right, we're talking about making more profit. It's a simple idea. Every CEO should be thinking from this perspective and working from the CEO dashboard, right? It's leads, conversions, transactions, and ultimately profit. Those are the levers that we need to be aware of and paying attention to, supported by understanding our P&L, knowing our numbers, and looking at and reviewing that information weekly. The changes that we make when we make a 3% change to our profit, or we do it in 3 distinct areas across, Cheryl said it twice, so that leads to a 46% growth opportunity. This is something that every CEO, every business owner can and should be doing. This is a process that can recession-proof, pandemic-proof, whatever proof your business, because it is creating an operating model where you're making decisions wearing the right hat and focused on the growth and the outcomes of your business. Everybody who is listening has an opportunity to learn from what we've talked about today. Cheryl, I appreciate your time, and audience members, you know my rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show.